A clean stone room, a calm patient lying neatly on a bed, a gentle healer hovering like a saint, a miracle that feels almost tidy. Now forget all of it, because almost everything about how we imagine illness in Jesus' world is wrong. There were no hospitals in Galilee, no medical wards in Jerusalem, no sterile instruments laid out on linen, no anesthetic to quiet pain, no antibiotics to stop infection, no lab tests to explain what was happening inside the body. When Jesus healed people, he wasn't entering a healthcare system. He was walking into a world where sickness could erase your life socially, economically, spiritually long before it killed you physically. And nowhere is that clearer than one scene in the Gospels. Jesus heals a man born blind, not a man who lost sight later, a man who had never seen light. So what did people actually do when illness struck in Jesus' time? Who treated them, if anyone did? What counted as medicine? And why did one healing one blind man receiving sight cause shock, outrage, interrogation, and fear? To understand that moment, we need to rebuild the world around it. Because in the first century, disease wasn't just biology. It was identity. Modern people experience illness inside private rooms. Ancient people experienced it in the open. Most homes were small. Villages were tight. Everyone knew who was sick. Everyone knew how long they'd been sick. Everyone knew if your condition was getting worse. And many illnesses were visible. Swollen joints, crippled legs, skin lesions, chronic bleeding, seizure-like episodes, wasting diseases that slowly drained a body. In that world, sickness wasn't just pain. It was vulnerability. If you were a fisherman and your hands failed, your income collapsed. If you were a laborer and your leg broke, your family went hungry. If you were a mother and childbirth went wrong, there wasn't a modern team waiting to intervene. Even a small wound could turn deadly if infection set in. People didn't fear sickness only because it hurt. They feared it because it could take everything. There were physicians in the Roman world, and Greek medical ideas circulated widely. Some doctors understood bones, wounds, basic surgical procedures. They used tools. They wrote about symptoms. They had theories, often based on balancing bodily fluids. But in rural Galilee, most ordinary people didn't live within reach of professional care they could afford. So treatment usually meant a combination of home remedies, olive oil on cuts, wine used to clean wounds, crushed herbs, poultices made from plants or fruit, warm compresses, bandages torn from cloth, diet and rest. If you could rest, many couldn't. Folk practice, charms, spoken formulas, locally trusted healers, and whatever people believed had worked before. Not as a last resort, but as the first language of crisis. And here's the brutal truth. Sometimes these things helped a little. Often they didn't. If infection spread through the body, there was no reliable way to stop it. If a bone healed badly, it stayed crooked. If fever climbed too high, families could only watch. And if you were born blind, that wasn't the case. That was a life sentence in Jesus' world. Certain conditions were not handled by doctors at all. They were handled by priests. The Torah contained detailed purity laws. Some skin diseases required inspection. The priest declared a person clean or unclean. That wasn't modern medical diagnosis. It was religious status. This mattered because purity was not a small side issue. Purity shaped belonging. To be unclean could mean limited access to worship. It could mean separation from communal life. It could mean being avoided sometimes, aggressively, so the sick did not only suffer physically, they risked becoming untouchable. And that is why the healings of Jesus were never just medical. They were social restorations. He didn't only change bodies, he returned people to life. Blindness today is tragic, but modern society has tools, education support, accessibility, mobility assistance, careers in the first century. Blindness often meant dependency from childhood to death. A blind person could not farm, could not fish, could not build, could not easily travel alone, could not defend themselves. Many ended up begging near busy roads or entrances where people passed and coins were possible. They heard crowds, heard debates, heard prayers, heard footsteps, but they lived on the edge of community close enough to be seen, never fully included. And congenital blindness from birth carried a special weight because in that world, permanent conditions demanded an explanation, and the common explanation was moral. Here is the belief that shaped reactions to illness. If God governs the world, then suffering must mean something. Not always personal sin. Jewish scripture itself contains stories that challenge simplistic blame, but everyday thinking often drifted toward harsh logic. Blessing looks like health. Affliction looks like guilt. That's why, when Jesus encounters a man born blind, the first question from his disciples is not medical. They don't ask, what caused this? They ask, who sinned, this man or his parents? That question tells you everything in their minds. Blindness wasn't just a condition. It was a verdict, and if the verdict is real, then the blind man isn't only pitied, he is suspected. Now watch what Jesus does. He doesn't accept the framework. He rejects it. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. In one sentence, he breaks the moral trap. He refuses to let the man's body be used as evidence of hidden guilt. And then he moves from words to action. Jesus does not call for instruments. He does not summon physicians. He does not ask the priest to inspect the man. He kneels. He spits on the ground. He makes mud, and he puts it on the man's eyes. That detail matters because it feels strange even now. But in the ancient world, people believed bodily fluids could carry healing power. Some folk remedies used saliva. Clay and mud also appeared in healing practices. So yes, parts of this look like a remedy. But here's the difference. No remedy fixed congenital blindness. No folk healer could give sight to someone born without it. Then Jesus gives a command. Go. Wash. He sends the man to the pool of Siloam. And the man goes. He washes. And for the first time in his entire life, light exists. Edges sharpen. Shapes form. Faces become real. The world stops being sound only. He can see that, and now the story becomes something bigger than healing, because the miracle doesn't end the problem. It starts one. You would think the community would celebrate, but they don't know what to do with this, because if he can see, then the old theory collapses. If he was born blind because of sin, what does sight mean now? Did God reverse a punishment? Was the punishment never real? Were they wrong about him the whole time? So people begin with the first human response to the impossible. Denial. Some say, isn't this the beggar? Others say, no, it just looks like him. And the man now seeing keeps repeating a single line that cuts through all the noise. It's me. That's the first shock. Not theology. Identity. The blind man is no longer a category. He is a person. And now the authorities step in. Because miracles aren't only wonders. They are threats when they challenge control. The religious leaders interrogate him. Not because they don't like healing, but because the healing came from the wrong person. In the wrong way, with the wrong implications. They focus on procedure. When did it happen? How did it happen? Who did it? And the man tells them the simple truth. He put mud on my eyes. I washed. Now I see. But they argue over Jesus. Some say, he can't be from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath. Others say, how can a sinner do signs like this? And the man born blind, who's been treated like a moral object his whole life, suddenly becomes the sharpest voice in the room. Because he has something they don't. experience. He doesn't debate theory. He speaks fact. I was blind. Now I see. Then the pressure rises. They call his parents. His parents are afraid. That fear is important because it shows what healing threatened. Not only ideas, but safety. They confirm he was born blind. They confirm he is their son. But when asked how he now sees, they pull back. Ask him. He's of age. Why? Because associating with Jesus is becoming dangerous. The healing gave one man sight, but it exposed the cost of truth in that society. The leaders keep pressing. They want the man to say Jesus is a sinner. They want him to fit the system, but he won't. And he finally says what no one expects from the former beggar. Do you also want to become his disciples? That's not just courage. That's reversal. The interrogated becomes the one who questions. The unclean becomes the one who exposes their blindness. And that is when the system does what systems do when they cannot control the truth. It ejects the person. They cast him out. Imagine the cruelty of that moment. He has sight for the first time in his life. And they remove him from the community. They don't deny the miracle anymore. They punish the man who proves it. And now Jesus returns to the story in the most important way. Because Jesus doesn't only heal and leave. He finds the man. He restores him twice. First his eyes, then his belonging. This is the part modern people miss. In a world without hospitals, healing was not just a health improvement. It was a social resurrection. A healed man could work again, could eat with others without suspicion, could stand in worship without shame, could be touched without fear. And when Jesus heals a man born blind, he's doing something medicine could not do. But he's also doing something society refused to do. He refuses to turn suffering into accusation. He refuses to let a disabled body become a moral verdict. He reveals that the deepest blindness in the story isn't in the man's eyes. It's in the certainty of the people who think they can label a life. And then everything lands in one simple truth the healed man becomes famous for. I was blind. Now I see. Not poetry, not philosophy. A statement of reality that breaks the old world. Because if that can happen, then the system was never as solid as they thought. 2,000 years later, we still tell the stories of Jesus healing. But now you can feel what made them explode in the first place. Not just that a miracle happened, but that it happened in a world with no safety net. No institutions, no cures, only stigma, fear, and endurance. And Jesus didn't merely treat sickness. He dismantled the meaning people attached to it. So here's the question. Which part surprised you most? That illness was treated as judgment. That priests were part of the system. Or that the miracle didn't end in celebration, but in the man being cast out.